Another of our volunteers is Terry QUILICO. He came on at the beginning of the year, and he's been very influential in helping to promote Casa Italia. He is a co-author of A Viva la Festa, a picture book about about 20 different festivals that take place in the Chicago area. And he's a writer. He's a writer for Franoi, and he is also the author of Seatonville, a play, a short play, which you have the link to on YouTube about the Cherry mine disaster. I'm proud to present Terry QUILICO, and I don't know if he has his dog Stella with him, but if they're a great team.
Well, thank you, first of all. It's a great privilege to be able to participate in this. It certainly is a unique event here with Zoom, and just to be in this august company is a great honor for myself. And Fred, I'd have to say that my work is definitely a work of nostalgia. There's no doubt about it. For those who haven't had the chance to see the play, it was originally written as a presentation of play for the stage, but due to COVID, I had to make an adaptation to sort of an audio-visual presentation. As I said, it's very autobiographical. It concerns the lives of my grandparents, Caterina and Antonio, who came from Piemonte in a town, Castellamante, just about 38 kilometers outside of Torino, north of Torino. And they immigrated here in the late 1800s and went to Seatonville, Illinois, where my grandfather, Antonio, became a coal miner, worked in the Seatonville mine. And Caterina, of course, ran the house. And I found out through research that my cousin Candace Spade did, that they actually had boarders in the house, like many of the miners' homes did at that time. And they lived through one of the greatest mine disasters in the United States that took place in Cherry, Illinois, which was a town just very close to Seatonville. And the result of that day was that my grandfather never went down in the mines again. He subsequently became a worker on the railroad that actually owned the mine in Cherry. His friend, cousin, Mateo, who I think might have been their sponsor to get them into the States, and I think was also one of their boarders at one point, also never went down in the mines again as a result of the disaster.
Seatonville by Terence QUILICO, the mostly true story of Caterina and Antonio on their journey from Italy to the coal fields of Illinois and their lives through one of the worst mine disasters in U.S. history. Seatonville is brought to you under the auspices of Casa Italia, the Italian Cultural Center, and its curator, Dominic Candeloro. In today's presentation, the readers are portraying a boy, Caterina, Antonio, Matteo, and a narrator. Act 1, Scene 1, Seatonville, Bureau County, Illinois. A boy enters. Off stage, a woman sings, Mamma mia, dammi 100 lire.
There it is! White, asbestos shingled with green shutters, 2 pear trees behind the low picket fence, a lawn roller and mower to the side, the porch with the red, green, and white clamshell metal chairs. Ah, the pump on the side porch, the vegetable garden with lettuce, peppers, beans, and tomatoes, the grapevines, the wet stone wheel, the path to the outhouse and barn. It has not changed. It is all the same.
Scene 2, Castellammonte, Piemonte, Italia. Caterina enters. Che in America voglio andare.
I first saw him with his mustache and cigarillo parading on the Via Caniva with his two army friends, all brass buttoned, full of swagger, with their Stella d'Italia on their lapels. His companions were full of rude jokes, but he was quiet, serious, with steel gray eyes. A month later, we were working in the fields of La Casina, and he comes along riding his cavalloni.
Il figlio del capo che guarda I suoi lavorante.
He watches me all week, and then on the way home, he follows me, leading his horse and speaking in that quiet, soft voice of his. And that was all.
Antonio enters. I saw her on Caneva. She moved like a ship on the sea, all swaying and fluid, with coal black eyes to match her hair, laughing with her friends. And then, in the campo, her emotion at work was filled with purpose and grace, with that same grace given freely to those around her. That was all. What does love care of class, wealth, land, and breeding?
Si certo, Antonio. This is why we were accepted by all, and why we left our beloved families, land, and all our paesani, like unwilling mariners without charts or provisions to make the sad life in America.
Act 2, en route to and in Seatonville. Ma in America, no, no, no.
We would drive from Chicago in my dad's Studebaker, sometimes with my mom and rarely with my older brother. We would stop at White Castle and eat while driving with him, holding a can of Old Style low on the rim of the steering wheel. With each passing mile, his burden of city life and business would lighten. He told me of his nickname Dito and how he gained it by being so fast on the bases playing baseball, and how sometimes he would step on a hornet's nest in bare feet, and how he loved the New York Yankees because of all the great Italian players, Rizzuto, DiMaggio, Berra. He spoke of how he would bring 3 cows from pasture across the creek, and recalled foraging for coal on the side of the tracks that fell as freight trains rumbled through a curve for use in the stove at home. He once said that their horse knew the way home, so his mama didn't worry when Antonio had too much to drink at the tavern in Seatonville. In Spring Valley, he stopped at the Italian butcher's for saltisa, and if the road was clear, he let me shoot at road signs with my BB gun. The evening was built around La Cena, and it always had the same script. My job was to pick the beans and lettuce, washing the lettuce at the hand pump on the side porch. Sometimes we would have bagna cauda, but more usually it was polenta with melted cheese inside and a rich garlic, egg, and butter infused tomato sauce. The saltisa, sausage, Italian-style green beans, fried in garlic and bacon, and the lettuce ensalada, salted with wine vinegar and oil, all washed down with Nono's homemade red from the tiny cellar under the side porch. My father would always ask if the electricity was okay. He put in electric lights some years ago, and they would ask about their daughter Lena, who lived in Chicago suburb, and Dad would ask about his sister Emma, who lived on a large farm with her English husband a few miles away. When the meal was over, Antonio would sit over his small glass of vino, while Caterina scoured the dishes, pots and pans, and furiously swept the floor, while talking a mile a minute of how she was torn away from her bella Italia, famiglia e amici, to live in this hard life in the Stati Uniti. Unfazed and never protesting, Antonio would smooth his mustache and nurse his glass.
Act 3, Scene 1. Saturday, November 13, 1909. Seatonville Coal Mine. A vein off shaft number 2. I suoi fratelli alla finestra.
Down on the coal face, in shaft 2, Their carbine lamps flickered and sputtered, casting dancing sharp shadows on the black walls and timbers. The partners, Matteo, a digger, and Antonio, a blaster, made a good team, working efficiently and silently. Antonio's job was one of the most hazardous in the mine, as he had to go under the coal shelf to set the dynamite and igniter caps, cutting the fuses to the right length so they could have time to avoid the blast, sheltering and then loading together to fill the car to its 2-ton capacity.
Let us go up early today. We have done enough for our pails of beer. Let us ring for the hoisting cage and let the bosses be damned.
Certo, Tony. It is almost 3. Let us fill this last car and ring for the hoisting cage.
Exiting the cage and sucking in the sweet, cool air, the 2 men went to the UMW check weight man's shack to get the slip to verify the wages they earned today. As they left, they saw trappers, cagers, slate pickers, and mule handlers in a group, looking forward toward the black smoke billowing in the distance.
Matteo, guarda, it is the Cherry mine. For sure it is a big fire. We have to get to Lad to hop a train for Cherry. Alicio, our neighbor, is in that mine. Our help is needed. Scene 2, Cherry, Illinois, 3:45 p.m.
Standing on the packed flat car loaded with miners and firemen, the 2 Seatonville miners saw people on both sides of the tracks, in buggies, cars, and on foot, hurrying toward the mine. Men, women, hiking their skirts up to run faster. Children behind us, smoke and flames blossomed from the mule barn, tipple, and mine buildings ahead.
I tell you, Matteo, I am thinking of Marchetti when the roof collapsed and I couldn't pull him to safety. Frank Minardi when he died between those coal cars, and that poor Pole, August Romaneschi. It is all too much to bear. How can this happen at the safest mine in the country?
It was bedlam at the mine head. The huge Clifford Capel fan that provided air to the mine was on fire, as was the mule barn. Flames and smoke shot out of the ventilating shaft, and burnt smoldering bodies littered the ground. As they watched, a cage came up, but all were dead, piled atop one another, as in a hellish charnel house. Women were crying, praying, and screaming for their husbands, brothers and sons, as the police tried to hold them back. The 2 Seatonville miners were told that a hay car was ignited by a kerosene lamp and set everything ablaze, and the ventilator fanned the flames and sucked oxygen out of the mine when it was reversed. And worst of all, cars filled with coal kept coming to the top, while the flames and smoke filled the shafts, killing miners below.
You know, Matteo, I am not a religious man, but I swear by the Blessed Mother and all that is holy, I will never go down in the mine again. The Cherry mine disaster is the 3rd worst in U.S. history, and the worst mine fire. Of the 480 men and boys who went down in the mine that day, 259 perished. Americans and immigrant miners from every country in Europe, including 64 Italians. The steel and concrete mine was billed as the safest in Illinois and had electric lights in the main shafts, but weeks before, the electricity failed due to a short circuit, and the ordered replacement wiring had not arrived, causing the mine to revert to the old practice of kerosene lanterns, one of which spilled onto a loaded hay cart, igniting it. The cart was pushed down into the mine instead of pushing it up, in hopes of extinguishing the fire by a hose in one of the sumps. But the flames spread to the timbers. The fire was misjudged as insignificant, so coal cars continued to be brought out while the miners were not told to abandon the mine until hundreds of them were trapped below. An engineer who was responsible for the main hoisting cage did not bring miners up, despite pleas of those around him, because he didn't receive the proper signals from those below. He was removed from the town before the inquest. The St. Paul Coal Company that operated the mine for the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railroad made sure that several on-site company officials who would have given unfavorable testimony at the inquest would not be located. There were numerous acts of heroism by miners and rescuers, and the disaster-filled newspaper headlines worldwide. When all was considered lost, Antonio Quartarelli and 20 companions were rescued after 8 days trapped below. It can be said they did not suffer and die in vain. In 1910, the U.S. Bureau of Mines was established. Child labor laws and a Workers' Compensation Act was passed by Congress, and many new regulations were enacted governing safety in the mining industry. Antonio made good on his vow and never went down in the mines again. He was hired by the same company that owned the mine and worked as a train master and boilermaker for the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railroad. Caterina and Antonio were married in a registry office in Bureau County on May 25, 1899, raising 2 daughters and a son. Antonio never spoke of his service in the Italian army in the decade after the unification of Italy, but when his son told him he wanted to become a flyer to fight in the Great War, he received the only slap he was ever given with the words, "You do not know the horrors of war, and as long as I am alive you will not learn them." Caterina attended Mass at St. Gertrude's and quietly said her rosary each evening. They never learned English, never became U.S. citizens, and are buried in Bureau County in the same earth that Antonio toiled under. The work was originally conceived as a stage play to be performed by members of the staff at Casa, Italia. However, due to COVID-19 distancing requirements, the roles were read by Darlene, Derek, and Terry QUILICO under stay-at-home rules. The playwright thanks his cousin Candace Fay for archival documents and fact-checking, my dear Torinese friend Mario Navoli for Piemonte dialect, Jason Giassoni of the Italian Cultural Center for Italian support, and our curator, Dominic Candeloro, for the overall support of the Italian Cultural Center and for inclusion in Literati 2020.
So the play is, I stated, is mostly true, and it is. There are some things that I used license to say that they went to the mine the day of the disaster. Many thousands of people did. Many miners in the area did. They went to see if they could help in Cherry. So they were taking the train from Ladd, Illinois, there. And it is supposition on my part that that's what happened. But it's intensely autobiographical. It's a short play. It's very hard not to trivialize their lives in something that's only 16 minutes long. But the nice thing about it is we were able to add a soundtrack to it, and the roles were played due to COVID-19 by my wife and son and myself. So we compressed the 5 roles down to 3, and it was a labor of love. I mean, it's something that just I had to do. It was something that I felt I needed to express. The play, when we do it as a play, and I think we will be able to perform it once COVID is over, is going to be expanded over the audiovisual presentation we have. I think that the roles of Caterina and Antonio will also have, and Matteo as well, will also have the Italian roles, language will be used, as well as English. Just a little note about Matteo. I met him when we used to go down to Seatonville, and he was the most generous man I think I've ever met. My father and I would go over there, and we'd depart with a couple of baskets full of every possible fresh fruit and vegetable you could see. And kindest, gentlest man, and he swore like a sailor. I mean, he had quite a vocabulary on him. But you'd walk into his house, and the house was literally filled wall to wall with holy cards, pictures, citations from popes, statues of saints. So he was a great, great man. And I asked my father why he lived alone, and he just said he had a great tragedy in his life, and my father never went beyond that point. But I wrote this to honor my grandparents, and one of the things that came out, family legend was that they came from Italy because my grandfather was part of the Droni, part of the landed gentry, and he fell in love with this peasant who was working the fields, and that part is definitely true. But one of the reasons they came to the United States, I found out from my cousin Candace's mom, who wrote a letter, is because she didn't want to be dominated by her mother-in-law in Italy. So that was one of the main reasons, I think, that they decided to immigrate to the United States. I have memories of my grandfather also. After his wife died, he lived with us for a while in Chicago. And he also lived with his other daughter, Lena. And I just remember him sitting in the morning and watching cartoons and laughing, and watching him somewhat bemusedly walking through the yard, the small yard in our backyard, looking at the pitiful grapevine, hearing all the noise, seeing the lifestyle in Chicago, and you knew that he felt he was an alien atmosphere. Just as when I went to Seatonville, it was a totally different world that opened up to me. There was, I just want to say, when I edited this, it's a multi-layered thing, and it was like 2 in the morning when I was finishing it up, and I left some transitional dialogue out of the second scene spoken by the boy that is me remembering, and it's just after La Cena, after the dinner at the house. So I'll just read this short section because it's a transitional scene, the end of Act 2, before the beginning of Act 3, which is in the Seatonville coal mine. And after La Cena, and after Antonio and Caterina Caterina was going on about how she missed Italy, how she regretted coming to the United States. And Antonio would just smooth his mustache and nurse his glass of vino. To break the mood, Dito would either play his concertina or the upright piano in the front parlor, singing some well-loved Italian songs or arias that would bring Nona to tears. My bedroom was at the front of the house, looking out on the pear trees and their brilliant star canopy with sounds of the locomotives straining and climbing the grade. But dominating the landscape was a looming Seatonville spoil stump of orange and black earth, dredged up from the coal-rich, hollowed-out ground below, and the sister-scarred peaks of Ladd, and in the distance, Cherry Valley. So that's what I left out in my haste. Not a good thing for an editor not to be able to edit his own work. But if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you, Terry. This is Anna. Do we have any questions? Any questions from the audience?
Well, let me just say one more thing here. My dear friend Mario Navoli from Italy is who helped me with the Piemontese dialogue or dialect is on the call, and I just want to say grazie, Mario, and Forza Toro. And Candace Fay, my cousin, is also on. They'll help me with the archival work. So thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry. I do see a couple questions. I have visited the cemetery outside Cherry. Is there still an Italian community in the vicinity there?
You know, I regret that I haven't been to Cherry. I've been to Seatonville, but I haven't visited Cherry yet, so I don't know if there is any Italian community still there. A lot of people, a lot of the widows and their families after the mine disaster did return to Italy, and there was some small compensation finally made begrudgingly pretty much by the coal company, and it had to be negotiated, and it really was a pittance for these young men and boys who gave their lives in the disaster. And there were also, by the way, rescuers who went down. There was a doctor from Cherry and other people who went down and lost their lives trying to get the miners up. It was quite a tragedy that made headlines worldwide, really.
Did anyone get compensated? Did anyone get compensated for the disaster? Or was everyone allowed off the hook?
The survivors' families, or not survivors' families, the people who lost their lives did get compensated. Their families did get compensated by the mine company. But the great achievement was that after the disaster, there was a great deal of legislation about child labor laws, about safety in the mines, that was enacted. So you can say that these people did not lose their lives in vain.
I believe I have another question. Have you ever visited your family's hometown in Italy?
Yes, in 2002, my wife and I went to Castellamonte, and it's nestled up right in the foot of the Alps there. Beautiful little town, and they have a church, St. Peter and Paul, that was built to sort of mimic the Rotunda in Rome. It's made of bricks, but it's quite an interesting sight to see. And we did try to find relatives when we were there, but we did buzz one lady in her room, but she was very old and she couldn't come downstairs. So unfortunately, we couldn't connect with anyone. But on our trip to Italy, I constantly talked about my excitement of being in Italy. And just for background, I worked for an airline for most of my working life. And my dad always said, go to Italy, you have to go. And I didn't go. I sent him that I didn't go. And finally, when I did go, I was so excited to be there. And I would tell everybody that I was from America and this is my first time back, and my family was from Castellamonte. I'm a fan of Torino Calcio, which of course everybody said that was too bad. But when I entered the outside of Castellamonte, I was so excited, and my Italian is so poor that the toll gate guy, I kept on saying, you know, I'm coming to Italy now. It's my first time. I'm going to visit my grandparents who were left here 100 years ago. I mean, I was so excited. The guy said, non è vero, non è vero, non è possibile. So I made a fool of myself, but I was just ecstatic to be there. It was great.
Thank you very much,
Peter,
Terry.
Peter
Can
Perro
we
has
ask-
a question.
Yes, Terry, nice job today. Want
Thank
to
you,
ask
Peter.
if there's any celebration on Columbus Day or particular celebration on Labor Day down there related to Cherry, related to unions? Any vestige of that?
Yes, they do have a celebration, or they do have a commemorate the mine disaster. In my videos, there's a picture of the monument they have to the mine disaster. And they really do it more on the 10th anniversary, each 10th anniversary of the disaster. But every year, I think there is a small, I think that Dominic went down there as well.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, they do remember. Thank you, Peter.
Nice job.
Oh, thank you, Terry. There are plenty of Italians, people of Italian ancestry sprinkled throughout Illinois as a result of the fact that they were in coal mines throughout Illinois. A lot of the people who ended up in Highwood started off in coal mines, but after coal mining went bad in the 20s and 30s, they drifted to other places. But you can always find a good Italian restaurant in any small town that you're in rural Illinois.